Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. It's very good to see you all here tonight. I'm just going to go through a couple of housekeeping rules from the beginning. Firstly, fire exits are at the back. If you could all make sure that your phones are off, please, or on airplane mode. We will have a Q&A at the end of the session. Heidi will explain the running order. We have some media as well at the back, so if you could be quiet near them. So, welcome to all of you who are here in person, who've made it out on this rainy day, as well as those of you who are watching us online and by live stream. To introduce myself, my name is Selma Dabagh, and I'm the COO of the International Centre of Justice for Palestinians, ICJP. I would like to extend firstly my thanks to Yvonne Williams of 1 Great George Street for her support in providing the location, and my phenomenal team at ICJP, Yuval, Dania, Manvir and Mohammed, as well as the directors Crispin and Tayeb. Also special thanks to members of my advisory board, two of whom will be speaking tonight, Wada Khanfa and Sarah Lee Whitson, who've given us invaluable support in recent weeks and months. Also, last thank you to the former UN Special Rapporteur for the Occupied Palestinian Territories, Michael Links, who couldn't be here in person but who sent us support. Anyway, so we've all got here today between the sort of COVID period and the monkey, and we're very excited to have such a good turnout. We had hundreds who signed up to attend the event, and 3 weeks ago we were afraid that we didn't have one person on the list, so that's fantastic. To introduce the organisation, ICJP is brand new. We're coming up to our first birthday. We're a centre comprised of lawyers, politicians, academics and journalists. I myself am a lawyer and a novelist. The centre is interdisciplinary, international and independent. We seek to work with politicians, lawyers, academics, the media and artists to acquire justice for Palestinians. Our quest is for equality of treatment under the law and for the support of the rule of law. It is our belief that if the law is strong enough to protect Palestinians, it is strong enough to protect anyone. We are here today because the Israeli regime has in recent years to be found to be committing the crime of apartheid. This is probably the first panel assembled like this, and these are the writers of those reports which came out over the last 2 years, one after the other. And Heidi will be giving them a proper introduction. The panel's purpose is to show and to emphasize, one of the purposes, is to emphasize that apartheid is a legal definition according to the Apartheid Convention and the Rome Statute. So the key writers will present their findings, but also more importantly address what the UK government should be doing to address this crime. So we're an international centre seeking justice for Palestinians. To some of you that might seem niche, to others it might seem too broad. Firstly, what does it mean to be a Palestinian? You will hear from some of the speakers some of the rights violations inflicted upon Palestinians for decades, a continuing process of dispossession carried out through discriminatory laws backed by violence, occupation and surveillance. But we are not just victims. We also have a history of achievement and resistance of which we are proud. I was recently given the honour by Ben Jamal of the Palestinian Solidarity Campaign to lead, with 9 other Palestinian women, a demonstration marking 74 years of the Nakba, or catastrophe, of 1948, when 2/3 of the population of the former British Mandate were expelled. I myself am the daughter of a Nakba survivor. My father left Palestine on a stretcher at the age of 10 in the back of a lorry, and he has never been able to return. He was hit by a grenade thrown on him and the children he was with in Jaffa. For 45 years, he has been a member of the institute in which we are housed, the Institute of Civil Engineers, and runs, together with my English mother, vast, large irrigation and desalination projects around the world. from Ghana to Tashkent. What can I say? The city of Jaffa lost out and the UK gained. So on this march, we were chanting a lot, 15,000 or so of us, through the hot, crowd-filled London streets, being watched by police, filmed by tourists, and organised with people with megaphones. Many of the chants were familiar and some were improvised on the spot. For example, from London to Jenin, justice for Shireen. But there were some old favourites as well. In our tens, in our millions, we are all Palestinians. And I was marching along wondering what exactly that meant, we are all Palestinians, and why would anyone want to join that call? Being Palestinian is not an easy birthright to handle or a label to live with. It is not an uncomplicated one to pass on to your children. It has deliberately, persistently been associated with pejorative terms, violence, fanaticism, and terrorism, despite the fact that along with the Armenians, we are said to be one of the most educated populations in the world. But what is it about being Palestinian that is specific, attractive, and urgent? And on that, I would turn to a quotation by Fawaz Turki, a refugee from Palestine who spent a period of time as a cowboy in Australia before turning to politics, somebody whose life deserves its own mini-series. Turki was a controversial figure, but a cogent and exceptional writer. In his 1972 book, The Disinherited, he writes, "If the Palestinian revolution is armed with a philosophy at all, it is armed with the anti-determinist vision of the open-endedness of the future. I would therefore ask all of you here in the audience, during these darkest of times, to consider becoming Palestinian or more Palestinian in terms of how you listen to this panel and what you do later. Be armed with an anti-determinist vision of the open-endedness of the future." But we cannot speak of Palestine without mentioning trauma. Our modern English vocabularies are littered with words of psychoanalysis. Millennials are mocked for being traumatized and triggered at the drop of a hat. But the dimension of the psychological in seeking a resolution to this specific conflict cannot be overlooked. Minds need to be changed before laws can be reformed. What interests me, though, as a writer, when observing and recreating human behaviour, is not the nature of trauma itself, for we all have our scars, our war wounds, our demons, but how people or characters exercise agency to overcome their trauma. I once read that there are 3 responses to trauma: repression, reenactment, and rehabilitation. Israel-Palestine is a clear example of repression and reenactment of traumatizing behavior on a grand scale. As the French Jewish philosopher Simone Weil once famously put it, pain and suffering form a kind of currency passed from hand to hand until they reach someone who receives them and doesn't pass them on. The quest is to move away from reenactment and repression to rehabilitation. And on that note, I would like you to look again at our exceptional speakers, not only as experts in international law and human rights, but as individuals. These are people who have been harassed, suffered reputational damage, been isolated, had job offers blocked because of their desire to see equality, liberty, and justice for Palestinians. In the case of the American Omar Shakir of Human Rights Watch, he was deported from Israel for his work. Hagai from B'Tselem has been accused of being a traitor to his country, his religion, his people. To be socially shunned, harassed, and trolled is experienced across the board. Shawan Jabareen, the head of Al-Haq, has been personally targeted and subject to administrative detention based on secret evidence. He has been banned from travel for several years. He is the head of Al-Haq, and when it comes to Al-Haq itself, the oldest Palestinian human rights organization, they have had their offices ransacked, their workers harassed, attacked, and imprisoned. Multiple attempts have been made to close them down. cut their funding, and most recently they have been designated, along with 5 others, as a terrorist organisation by the Israeli government. The 5 others are Ad-Damir Prisoner Support and Human Rights Association, Bizan Centre for Research and Development, Defence for Children International Palestine, the Union of Agricultural Work Committees, and the Union of Palestinian Women Committees. We at ICJP are proud to stand by the 6. Israel's designation enables it to close their organisations, seize their assets and their work, end their work, and change their leadership and charge their leadership and staff with terrorist offensives. We at ICJP support the UN support and others in the condemnation of this designation of civil society organisations by the Israeli government, and we call on the British government to join in this condemnation. I'm just going to pause for a second there and just say that there's one person who I was hoping who could be here tonight, but her visa wasn't extended, and I just want to mention her because we often in these discussions seem to be increasingly forgetting refugees. And she was someone, Fadia Lubban, who I had the pleasure of meeting recently, who lives in Burj al-Barajni refugee camp. A film has been made about her. Burj al-Barajni is a camp with 65,000 people living in 1 square kilometre. At the age of, in her 50s and 60s, she has taken to writing short stories, and the film Fadia's Tree is showing tomorrow at the BFI. But with her, you think about hope and the nature of hope, and I have 2 quotes here. One from Mahmoud Darwish, the Palestinian poet that we all know. Without hope, he says, we are nothing. And with that, the political writer and activist Emma Goldman concurs when she says, without dreams, we die. So I have been told that at Shireen Abu Akleh's funeral, by people who were there, that Palestinians of all religions came together. Centuries-long schisms between the multiple churches in Jerusalem were set aside. The bells from the churches were joined by the call to prayer, possibly for the first time, with the mosques joining them. Rich and poor, refugee villager and city dweller, both religions or none, walked together in the funeral march. The men who held up her coffin, whose legs were kicked from under them by Israeli forces, came from different factions and backgrounds, yet they did not let go. We are capable of unity. We are here to seek rehabilitation as an end goal, not reenactment. We are here as we will not tolerate the ongoing, unceasing repression. I urge you to listen to our speakers, stand with us, support our work, and I will now hand over to my colleague, our External General Counsel and International Criminal Barrister, Heidi Dixtel, who will moderate the legal discussion. Thank you.